Barry Hearn tries to explain his previous slave trade comments that he made at the Dillian White Oscar Rivas press conference. What up, Fight World? It's your boy Ego, and I'm back with some more boxing. Now, I'm on the verified page of Barry Hearn. Link in the description. He was asked by IFL TV what his response was for his comments that he made. Now, I did videos about it. The weekend the Avengers came out, they did a Dillian White versus Oscar Rivas fight. And during that fight, they did a press conference for the fight, I guess you could say. During the week, they had a press conference. They were both fighters there. Dillian White being the matchroom fighter. He was chilling right next to Barry Hearn. Barry Hearn all of a sudden got on the mic and made a statement that rubbed a lot of people the wrong way for obvious reasons. It was very distasteful. It was a poor choice of words. And it left a lot of people confused as to like, hey, what are you referring to? He made a statement. You guys can find the video. And you look at it and the statements he made, he said, back in the day, it was like the slave trade in boxing, right? And he says, now I have to talk to Dillian White and call him, by his surname and, be professional, call him Mr. White. But it used to be like the slave trade, and it was a lot different back in the day versus now. And it's a good thing. And, people listen to it again for verbatim what he said, and he also said, oh, the WBC needs to give Dillian White a crack at the whip, So if you guys like battle rap, you'll know how people have schemes and they'll talk about car parts and all the bars will relate. Man, I stab you like it's trying to buckle the seat belt, heat melt, fucking AC in the retail, and they doing the whole scheme using car parts. You get what I'm saying? Man, I give you a moonroof, sun top, hood pop, gas up, fill up, and everything has something to do. That's why it sounded really weird. He's talking about slave trade, and now I got to call him by Mr. White and Sir. And, we used to pick out fighters and a WBC crack at the whip. So obviously people felt a type of way. Now he just did an interview clarifying, and I think he did an abysmal job of trying to clarify. And I told you the power of new media is real. First of all, the pressure is coming in. The pressure is coming in from new media because we're talking about these things. There's nothing wrong with talking about it, especially if we're reacting to what someone else says. Barry Hearn misused his words. He confused a lot of people. He said stuff that was distasteful, and there was a million different other ways to suggest or qualify what he was saying, and he didn't choose those. Sometimes people get older and they're stuck in their ways or whatever. You have to realize you have to be PC and you have to be politically correct, and you have to be cognizant of the words you use because you might offend a group or groups of people or whatever the situation. But I didn't like what he had to say because the link's in the description. You guys watch it. He basically doubled down and he said, basically, he cut off the person say, oh, I haven't talked to you. I want to get your stance on it. The slave trade comments. And you could see his face. He's like, and then he cuts off the person in mid question and starts rambling about his answer. And he's like, oh yeah. Basically what Eddie Hearn did at the fight for Canelo Jacobs, which was, I think the quickest fight, the fight that happened right after that comment. And he's just trying to be dismissive and say, oh, people are overreacting, basically. And people took it out of context. I didn't mean it like that. I'm sitting next to a black African-American man. I didn't mean it like that. What I was referring to is, back in the day, the boxers weren't taken care of, this, that, and the third. And boxers, after their contracts, they would run and be happy that they were free because they were mistreated and this, that, and that. And he said he used a quote unquote colorful word, right? Then he says, people took it out of context. It wasn't like that. And if you know the history of boxing, then you would know what I meant. And if you don't, then you should shut the fuck up, end quote. Those are the words he said. This just made it worse for Barry Hearn. It was a horrific explanation. And the Hearns are getting ran out of America. That's just what it is. I haven't seen, Eddie Hearn said he was going to take over in America. And I think they're realizing that it's a lot harder of a market to crack than they initially thought. I would have preferred Barry Hearn say nothing than to give this type of response to those distasteful comments. Listen, despite how he meant it, the fact is it was taken the wrong way. A lot of people did not appreciate it. And, somebody who is an accountant and owns a business and been in business, you can at least, if you're honest with yourself, see how that would be a bad look. Like I could, like, even if I wasn't meaning something a certain way, but once it was received that certain way, you could be like, oh, okay, I could see how it looked. Like, okay, let's say I'm a comedian and I was just making like jokes that are part of my shtick or something. And then I start talking about people with disabilities. And then I'm like looking down, I keep looking down, and people could see this like on my Netflix special. And I'm saying something, oh yeah, people with disabilities, man, they be staring and stuff. And I'm saying these distasteful comments. And then there's someone who actually has a visible disability in the front row, and it looks like I'm looking at them. So people are going to draw a direct parallel. And even if you didn't even see that person, it's not a good look. It's not a good look that you said this particular joke and it was offensive to somebody who was in the front row. Regardless of you seen them, irregardless of if you've seen them or not, or whatever the situation, it's a bad look. Barry Hearn and Eddie Hearn have this narcissistic type of mentality, in my view, where he's not even copping to that. He said, oh yeah, you should know what I meant. First of all, if you listen to the interview, he starts saying a bunch of shit that he didn't say that night on the stage. So how are we supposed to know what you mean when what you're saying now was not the same choice words or anything close to what you actually said? How are we supposed to just play psychic and have telekinesis and just guess that's how you meant? You said very direct, short form sentence structures that rub people the wrong way. You said, oh, back in the day, in my day, it was like the slave trade. We just pick a fighter and, now we got to do things different. It's a different world. We got to call them by their last name. You didn't say all this about the fighter get mistreated. And, that's why you have lawsuits, because promoters used to rob fighters. And now you didn't do all that. So that is a reason why it's unbelievable what he's saying, is because now, first of all, why are we just now? The Avengers Endgame has been out. And that's, I related to that because that's the weekend that this happened. That's because I remember I was at the Avengers. I went to see it the Monday it came out. And that's when this press conference happened. Because I remember people were blowing up my Twitter like, oh, did you hear what Barry said? And sending it to me. And I remember I was getting blown up in the movie. My phone kept lighting up. And then when I was leaving, Avengers Endgame. So that movie is already not the number one in the box office. It got overtook by John Wick 3 or some shit. So why are you just now even responding? I'm telling you, this new media shit is severe and we're forcing the conversation. They try to wait for it to die down and then now ask them. They're being forced. See, the UK, a lot of UK media and stuff, they weren't going to ask him. That's why they waited so long. They gave him time to try to think of some way to justify it. And waited and waited and waited. Now they want to ask him, clear a month later and see what he came up with in all this time. And then we waited all this time to get a reaction and a response to see and hear his explanation. And he basically blames people, narcissistic behavior. He's blaming the people for how he said what he said and interpreting it in a negative fashion. Now this is somehow our fault as people who were offended by that, versus, like I said in my analogy, you could, even if you didn't mean it like that, when someone's breaking it down, okay, black slavery, slaves in general really has no place at a press conference. You're sitting next to a black man, you're looking at him and you're saying, oh yeah, I got to call him Mr. White now. The WBC should give him a crack at the whip. Back in the day, it was like the slave trade. Even if you didn't mean it like that, with this whole scheme of words and vernacular and stuff, when someone explains it to you, it seems like you would at least be able to like, oh, okay, I didn't even mean it like that, but I could see that. and I didn't mean that. Like, there is no level. That's what I'm saying. Narcissistic behavior. There is no level of empathy. There is no level of remorse. This is just like pure cover up. Like, if you took it that way, then you took it out of context, and fuck what you talking about. That's your problem. And he even said in this interview, if you don't know the history of boxing, then shut the fuck up. This has nothing to do with the history of boxing. This has something to do with the history of your choice of words. And like I said, the better thing, in my opinion, would be for Barry Hearn to just admit that what he said, despite if he meant it like that, was a poor choice of words. I'm a big fan of analogies. I use them frequently on my channel. Similes, metaphors, double entendres, just the different forms of literature and comparison, alliteration. I'm well educated too. So I understand grammar and, compare and contrast and stuff like that. Venn diagrams and, just different ways of common denominator. I get that. But the bottom line is, once explained, it's very easy to see why people felt the type of way. And you can't even say, oh, I didn't even mean it like that. But that wasn't my intent. So, sorry, guys. So good luck to Eddie Hearn and Barry Hearn with this type of behavior, the constant lies about Joshua Wilder and, just the different things, and succeeding in America, because Americans aren't simply going to put up with and deal. The UK is a tight knit, closer community, and it's a much smaller place. So, it's not a good look that the Hearns are attached to DAZN, and they're taking this kind of pompous, narcissistic viewpoint and approach to these types of situations. Like I said, me personally, when I watched this response, I was like, oh, I got to see what he's talking about. I was hoping that he did the right thing and actually just said, oh, I didn't mean it like that, but I apologize if anyone took it offensively. What I meant is X, Y, and Z, and I felt fighters back in the day were mistreated, and that's just the way of the world. So now they're in much better opportunities in the, boxing. There's a lot of money in the sport, and you're seeing fighters get their due diligence or just due. But I didn't mean it like that. All he said was it was a colorful choice of words, and you need to understand the history of boxing. But it had nothing to do with the history of boxing. What the hell does the history of boxing have to do with slavery and the slave trade? Nothing. So once again, he was better off not even doing this. And like I said, I'm just the realest one to tell you this. The realest channel. It's a bad look, man. It's a real terrible look for the Hearns. All you had to do is just say, I didn't mean it like that. Sorry to the people who are offended. Cool. No foul. But the fact that you have this foolish pride, the fact that it took, a month and a half or whatever's been since the Avengers come out and this statement was initially received, to respond to it, that shows me what I need to know. So good luck seeing your business expand to the US, where you have an office, with this type of attitude, this type of narcissistic. You're basically blaming people who are offended and just relegating them to taking it out of context, when what you just said right now as your explanation, you didn't say any of these things when you said it. So it was actually your responsibility to be more profound, more eloquent with your words, right? Choose better words, be a little bit more tasteful, make sure you clarify. I know I do public speaking just in the form of making these videos. I use analogies all the time. I'm not comparing the Holocaust to boxing, slavery to boxing, apartheid to boxing, genocide through boxing. You don't see these types of, Native Americans being slaughtered, villages being pillaged. I don't really feel the need, and I know history, I don't really feel the need to compare those types of things, especially a sensitive subject like slavery, and you're sitting next to a black person. You can just imagine how that would not look good. But according to Barry Hearn, this is everyone else's fault. He did nothing wrong. And if you don't understand the history of boxing, even though his choice of words were nothing to do with what he's saying now, it's your fault. And if you took it out of context and don't know the history of boxing, quote, shut the fuck up. So that tells me what I need to know. It's a bad look for Hearns. And, more bad news. Deontay Wilder, he said he signed on to fight Luis Ortiz. And if he gets past him, Tyson Fury 2020. So it looks like America, American promoters, Top Rank, Al Heyman, the advisor, PBC, ESPN, they're kind of blocking the Hearns out. They're kind of because what is Joshua going to do? First, he has to get past Ruiz. We know that. But if he does, how does he get bigger? Who can he fight? Kubrat Pulev in the UK? Is that going to make him bigger than, Klitschko in the UK? He needs America. And I feel like the Hearns are hurting their brand and hurting their, their connection to DAZN with foolish pride just to be in the video and make a statement. Like I said, after hearing this was appalling that you would blame fans for taking it a type of way as opposed to just saying sorry, or I could see how it was misconstrued, but that wasn't my intent. I promise I'm not like that, something like that. So people could do it their way, but I'm not satisfied with this, so good luck promoting America. So if you enjoyed this video and want more content like this on the channel, you can show your appreciation by going to the PayPal donate button or the YouTube support button, and you can donate any amount that you feel is equivalent to the value of this video. Much more to come. Thank you guys for your support. Boxing Ego, the future of boxing.